salutations, and welcome to another episode of Just a Podcast. My name is Just Bob. Last time around, we talked a little bit about road trips, and I want to tell you a story and another story. It's two different ones that sort of relate to each other. Back in 2000? Was it 2000? Maybe it was 1999. I think it was 1999. 1999, I had a friend, Josie, who lived in the Outer Banks in North Carolina, and they were hit by a hurricane, as happens in that part of the world on more or less an annual basis. But this time, it was a big deal because Josie's house was flooded out, and in fact, the whole neighborhood was flooded out. Where her and her boyfriend lived was Hatteras Island, and basically their whole thing was, and so they were evacuated out, and they came to live in Ellicott City, up outside of Baltimore. And, we'd been friends, before that. And so we were hanging out, and she said to me one day, it's safe to go and get back into the house, not to move back in, but just to go and clear out what's left of our stuff. The problem is we don't have any way to get down there because her car had been flooded in the hurricane as well. And so I said, well, I can borrow my father's station wagon. I'll drive you down there. And so what ended up happening was I got my dad's station wagon. My dad's station wagon was an 88 Chevrolet Celebrity, silver. It was a big old conspicuous boat, basically. And three of us drove down to the Outer Banks in one night. And we got there just as the sun was rising. I guess it was around 6 in the morning. And because I'd gotten off work 7 p.m. the night before, so we had to round up and get ready and all that, and we weren't really on the road proper until almost midnight. So basically, I drove down there. I drove all night, and we got down to the house, and I curled up and went to sleep in the car while they got everything they could carry and loaded it up into the back. And that took, a couple hours. And I napped. And then when they were done, we went and stopped at a restaurant. I want to say it was a Waffle House or a Cracker Barrel, maybe. It was one of those places that you see everywhere. Went and got breakfast, and I got a large Coke to go, and we went and jumped back in the car and drove back, and so I that was like 12 out of 14 hours spent on the road, give or take. It was a very long night, and we didn't get home until it was sometime in the middle of the afternoon. It was almost dinner time by the time we got home, and it was a Saturday. And I remember getting home and going in the house and grabbing a shower and giving my dad his keys back, and just having this moment where I just thought, well, I guess I could go out tonight, and okay, well, let me see what everyone else is doing. Let me sit down and catch my breath for a moment. And plopped down on the couch and cracked open a beer, and somebody just sit here for 5 minutes. And I fell asleep almost instantly. So that didn't happen. Okay, so fast forward to now. Now, I've mentioned on the air a few times that Nitty Gritty is in New Jersey right now. She is working there temporarily. And I went out there to visit a couple weeks ago and spent the weekend. And this past Sunday, so a couple of days ago, it's now Wednesday as I'm recording this, Wednesday. What is the date today? Is September 23rd. So on Sunday, I went out there again just for a supply drop, basically, because, she'd had certain things at the house. They were like Amazon drops and other stuff, and that she needed, and so I volunteered to throw them in my car and drive them out there, and I couldn't stay because, it was Sunday, and so it was just drove out there. It was about a 4-hour drive. Went out there. I left. It's about 11 a.m. It's about 11 a.m., a little before 11, when I left my place. And so I got there. It was just about 3 in the afternoon when I got there. And we hung out for a couple hours, had dinner, and didn't really have time for much. And then by 7 o'clock, I was back on the road. So here's the weird thing. I have gotten to the point where I'm not going to say reliant on the GPS, but I use it, If I'm going on a trip to somewhere that I'm not familiar with, then I'll plug the GPS in, and so then this, because the last time I went to Jersey, I went up and I met her up near her work. This time I was going to the house that she's staying at, and I'd never been there before, so did the GPS, and it took me pretty close to the same route. Okay, so there was no real surprise there. And the weird thing was, because the route that it took me to get there was 81 north to I-78 east, I-78 into Jersey, okay? The route that it took me back was I-295 to I-95, and then I-95 all the way to Baltimore, and then 695 around Baltimore to I-70, I-70 all the way into Hagerstown, and then I-81 back to here. And the whole time I'm on my way back, I'm going, why is it taking me this way? I don't really understand that. When I was a kid, my family moved from Philadelphia to Columbia, Maryland. I was 9 years old, and 95 was, because we were just outside of Baltimore, so it was up to go back to Philly, and we went back to Philly a few times a year for events and to see family and friends and stuff like that. It's up and down 95, so I know that route very well. I've driven it dozens of times over the years, but it's not even close to the quickest way back here. And it turned out to be almost a half hour longer, and I realized afterwards that the reason that it directed me that way was because I put in no tolls. So I put in for no tolls as a setting on the GPS, and So it directed me away from the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and now it all makes sense. And so, because I was curious, I was sitting at my desk after the show yesterday, and I plugged the route in again, on my browser, and I did not specify no tolls, and it took me along the turnpike. So maybe I will just do like Nitty did, break down and just get an Easy Pass transponder, because avoiding tolls, you save a couple dollars, but you wind up going miles out of the way sometimes, and that was certainly the case here. It's interesting to me, though, how now that, GPS is an everyday thing, and it's something that we have kind of grown to depend on, in a way. Anytime we're going somewhere that's unfamiliar to us, as opposed to back in the day, and I don't really want this to turn into one of those, back in my day kind of deals, but, I do recall that there was a time when we didn't have GPS. So if you were going somewhere for the first time, what I did normally was I would consult a map, and then usually use that map and jot down some handwritten directions based on the map. And hopefully the map's right. Sometimes the map was wrong, or the map was outdated and things changed, and you put second left, and what was the second left is now the fourth left, and you wind up somewhere you had no intention of going. And that often happened to me in Northern Virginia. I have a saying, bad drivers don't go to hell, they go to Northern Virginia. And if you spent much time there, you know why this is. And so and I'm not talking like, around here, like around Winchester or whatever. I mean, like the Route 7 corridor, going towards DC. The further east you get, the worse the traffic gets. And there is a stretch there, Route 7. I don't know. The people that live there have my greatest admiration, because I don't know how they do it. Commuting on that every day, it would drive me insane. I mean, I've definitely gotten spoiled from living in a place where traffic is not that bad. People complain a lot about 81 and about how every time there is an accident, you have bad backup, and a lot of times there's spillage. The backup will create backups on Route 11 and stuff like that. And yeah, when you're stuck in it, it's a pain in the ass, and there's no two ways about it. It's something that you certainly want to avoid, but it's not a thing that happens every day. And I know from having lived, in some urban areas that, constant traffic, it is a thing. And it's astonishing to me how much of your life you can spend sitting in traffic. If you're not careful, I know there have been times in my life when I've had to commute a long way for whatever job I had at the time. And that really culminated when I first started working here at Verstandig Media, where I was working on the weekends. I was driving an hour and a half each way. I was living back with my parents in Columbia, Maryland, and I was driving an hour and a half to Greencastle every Friday, or every Saturday, every Sunday. That's an hour and a half Saturday work, an hour and a half back, an hour and a half here Sunday work, an hour and a half back. as you can probably imagine, that became an extraordinary grind after a while. And when I became full-time here, I decided I'm going to make my commute as short as possible. And for a while, I actually lived within walking distance of the radio station. For a few years there, I could walk here in under 20 minutes. And that is great. I live a little further away, but not that much further. It takes me about the length of one song to get to work. So it's about 5 minutes or so, which is not bad. And I don't want to be much further than that because, who wants to spend, a third of every single day in their car? No matter how much you love your car, I'd rather spend leisure time in my car doing something I want to do as opposed to going to and from work. I'd like to make that as quick and painless as possible. So that's a little road trip wisdom there. I think I used to do road trips for pleasure, and I just got burned out on it from having to do a long commute for so long. So that's some thoughts about road tripping, and I do thank you for joining me and listening to Just a Podcast once again. Really appreciate it. Join me again next time as we probably discuss more of... I'm not going to say more of the same, but something similar. We're in the wheelhouse. That's good. Thanks again for listening. I'm Just Bob.